University of Hong Kong is an international university which emphasizes the integration of research and teaching. The university promotes diversified, cross-cultural studies through various educational programs. To promote our educational vision, City University of Hong Kong produced a series called Beyond Boundaries, Dialogue with Presidents of World's Leading Educational Institutions. Professor Wei Guo, President of City University of Hong Kong, talks to presidents of universities and principals of high schools around the world, exploring each other's strengths and looking forward to the future direction of educational development. Vienna, the music capital of the world. The great masters of music in Vienna, such as Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, and Mozart, are the eternal classics. Vienna is also the capital of dreams. Sigmund Freud's classic work, The Interpretation of Dreams, and the psychoanalytic school of thought he founded have a profound influence on the study of the human psyche. Freud graduated from the University of Vienna and later became a professor at that university. This low-profile university has been associated with other great masters. Max Weber, one of the fathers of sociology, also taught at the University of Vienna. The Austrian School of Economics, which advocates economic freedom and the theory of subjective commodity value, was also originated at the University of Vienna. Its representative figure, Friedrich Hayek, won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1974. In addition to Hayek, 26 other professors and alumni of the University of Vienna have won the Nobel Prize. The University of Vienna, founded in 1365, is the second German-speaking university in the Holy Roman Empire, after the Charles University of Prague. Today, the University of Vienna is the largest university in Central Europe, with 15 faculties and 5 research centers, nearly 10,000 faculty members, and more than 90,000 registered students. The University of Vienna has always committed to elite cultivation, but now it is facing the challenge of providing high-standard elitist education under increasing enrollment. The University of Vienna is actively expanding its cooperation with universities and research institutes around the world, facilitating students' employment needs given the increasing number of graduates. In this episode, Professor Wei Guo, President of City University of Hong Kong, will continue the dialogue with Professor Heinz W. Engel, Rector of the University of Vienna, to discuss the university's development, direction, and vision. Professor Wei Guo, President of City University of Hong Kong, is well known for his research on the reliability of electronic systems and nuclear energy. In his early years, he worked at Bell Laboratories in the United States, who held the position of department head and dean of the School of Engineering in an American university, and was conferred academicians in various countries. Professor Wei Guo has served as the president of City U for more than 10 years. His philosophy of education is summarized in the lyrics of the City U anthem, which he wrote, "Learn and question beyond boundaries." Professor Wei Kuo has also published several books about education. He is particularly concerned about the challenges facing contemporary education around the world.
Higher education start from Europe, including you, of course, one of the earliest one. And then in the last 200, specifically last 100, it seemed to become more flourish in the United States and North America. So we are all reviewing this. Some universities, what I call, they go Americanized. So what is your view on that in terms of higher education?
Well, America is a very different system, of course. I spent years in American universities.
Of course.
They are still very strong in research. It's still a model for us. And in spite of the fact that we now have a common Europe in the European Union, including Britain, I would say, it's called European Research Area, still a lot of our cooperations go, of course, with American universities, and stronger now also with Chinese universities and universities in Hong Kong and in Japan. But America is still a model of research. Education is very different. It's expensive, especially if you go to good universities. It's very competitive, but you have to compare the whole system. In Austria, we pay much higher taxes than in America. But on the other hand, university education is free. So when you look at the whole system, I personally prefer the European system. But of course, we have to acknowledge that America in research is still, in some fields, like in computer science, in data science, it's among the leaders worldwide.
Your university has had a doctoral degree for a long time. But I heard that my understanding in the ancient time, people receive doctorate degree. They are not looking for employability, so to speak. But I heard that many European countries, including you, perhaps, are restructuring your doctoral education and to meet employment market. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, especially for a university which is so broad. We have data which show that how long the average waiting time for our graduates for a job is, and it's about 2 months when this was before the crisis. Now it might be even shorter because the labor market is developing very strongly here.
Well, this is a challenge for you and me and for people in our community. And to get a graduate degree, it seems to go beyond what traditional way to look at whether a person just have self-fulfilling, but also we have to help them to be properly employed.
Yeah, talking about doctoral studies, we really restructured them a lot in the last 10 years, and especially in the last 2 years. Years ago, we had a very open system. Anybody who had a master's degree from a European and even other universities could just admit himself, I would say, to a doctoral studies at the University of Vienna. We had no selection procedures, we had no entrance exams, and now this has changed dramatically. Of course, it needed also a change in law. So we have far less doctoral students now, but the completion rate is much larger. And we installed in the last few years structures which we call doctoral schools, where students are not only supervised by one supervisor, but with a group of students by groups of supervisors. And we put some funding into these doctoral schools to also fund retreats, research visits, visits to other universities, visits from visitors from outside. So I think, and we can now select our doctoral students. That's a big step, where for doctoral students, of course, we look at employability in the academic sectors, but also in the economy and in industry. Both has to be satisfied. And it's not clear that everybody who makes a doctorate will become a professor later. So we have to look at the whole labor market.
In recent years, the University of Vienna is actively seeking third-party research funding to drive research activities. The university is also facing a challenge to recruit more local and overseas students while reducing student dropout rates.
We know that Vienna is the second largest German-speaking city next to Berlin, I assume. And then certainly, I assume you are being influenced by the German system somewhat.
Yeah, it's a bit similar, but I would say our autonomy currently is bigger than the one in Germany. But on the other hand, the funding of research in Germany is, compared to the size of the country, still much larger than in Austria. We see this when we compare the funding of our National Science Foundation. And in Germany, they have Max Planck Institutes, Heisenberg, all kinds of institutes, which are closely linked to universities. If you look at German Nobel Prize winners, nearly all of them are linked to a university and, for instance, a Max Planck Institute. And that's what lacks in Austria, sort of the extra university structure closely linked to the university.
Well, when we talk about this research and graduate degree, again, the Americans have been very successful, but partially because American universities receive significant funding from the industries. And I think that's somewhat true in Germany too. How about in Austria?
Yeah, it's different at different universities. I originally come from the Johannes Kepler University in Linz. I'm an applied mathematician. And there we had a lot of funding from industry, car industry, steel industry, all kinds of funding. Now the University of Vienna is different. It's a broad university with many fields who are not directly fundable by industrial projects. And also one has to acknowledge that industry funding never can replace basic funding. So basic funding university has to be strong enough to do the basic research and education, also in order to attract industry funding. At the University of Vienna, we have a lot of funding from the European Union, from the National Science Foundation, but not enough, and I'm pushing this, or have been pushing this, from industry. Also because not all our fields are actually cooperation partners of the first choice for industry. Of course, chemistry is, physics is, mathematics. A special hub in Vienna is for life sciences. We have, for instance, Boehringer Ingelheim here, we have Takeda here, a lot of large companies also with their research departments. And there is a close cooperation with research institutes in this field. So Vienna is mainly life sciences.
Because you know the American way quite well. How you compare the funding-wise, the European level, American universities, roughly, or how you compare that? That's a difficult question, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, if you look at Harvard or also in England, Oxford or Cambridge, this is a different world, of course. But when I look at it from the view of a professor, I mean, in America, professors, when they're hired, they soon have to bring in their own funding, not even their salary.
That's right, very high
guaranteed.
percentage. I've been there for many years.
In comparison to that, our professors have a very, I would say, comfortable life. So when we call them, when we give them a contract, their basic funding and also basic equipment is funded by the university. But of course, in order to be promoted then, in order to get higher salaries, they have to bring in third-party funding, either from industry or from European Union. but it's not so much pressure, but the pressure comes more from their own self-reputation. And I think that's, let's say, a sounder system in some sense.
I see. But that's a good argument, actually. Sometimes when we get funding, it shows we accomplished something. So we are proud of this to show we are capable to doing that one. But the other issue is, it seems it's an international trend that we believe the general public should have opportunity to go to college, particularly in this part of the world, in Asia. Everyone wants to admit as many students as possible. But again, Americans are a little bit different. In Asia, we have one problem, which is everyone who has been admitted to university is able to graduate. But in the States, many of them could not graduate, some more than 40%. I understand in EU and Austria, they are also along the trend we are looking into this to accept more students, right? And also to reduce the dropout rate.
But that's very difficult. I mean, again, like in doctoral education, until a few years ago at the University of Vienna, we had to accept everybody with a high school diploma. And of course, we were flooded with students whom some of them didn't take their studies so serious and never finished. We had high dropout rates. Now, at least in some fields where there's a lot of inflow of students, we can select. And that itself, that we can select, has influenced a lot the way students are thinking about their studies. But there are still too many dropouts, and we have actually, when you compare to an American curriculum, you have fixed dates for an exam, and you are not there, then you have not passed the exam. We have a much more flexible system, which is good for good students, but doesn't put as much pressure on them. In general, until a few years ago, there were mainly universities. In America, you have a very diverse system. You have four-year colleges, you have community colleges, you have state university, you have top private universities. We had just universities, and now in the last 2 years, no, 10 years, 20 years even, there were so-called Fachhochschulen, so universities of applied sciences, pädagogische Hochschulen, and other elements of tertiary education in addition to universities. And they, of course, serve a different clientele, but they have increased the rate of tertiary educated people, which is now in Austria about 20% of the younger generation, I think from 18 to 34, statistically, but still way beyond what the European Union wants. The European Union has the aim that 30 to 40% of the population should have a degree, a university or tertiary degree. We are still far away from that. But I think this percentage has doubled in the last 10 years. So we are on a way, but we still have too many dropouts. For us in Austria, we need to strengthen research at all universities, and also the link between research and teaching. I think we have been a forerunner at the University of Vienna. Others have done so too.
Well, that's very good. And I really enjoyed the conversation with you.
And I enjoyed this conversation very much, even if it was in a quite unusual circumstances, but I think it went very well. So thank you very much.
各位朋友，你们今天可以见识了一个数学家对于高等教育的看法。维也纳是一个世界上最适宜生活的城市之一，也是一个非常丰富的城市。而这一位非常资深的校长，领导一个历史超过650年的大学。这个大学，它过去的经历，就像是世界大学的缩影一样。他们给我们解释了政治跟教育的分野，而且也强调了教育跟研究合在一起的重要性。特别我们发现， 维也纳大学对于联合国很多 organization， 因为在地利之便，所以也提出了很多的贡献，这些对我们大家都有很多的福利。由此可以见到，大学不只是纯粹的教学研究，它对于我们的生活，对于世界的发展持续性都能够有一个非常正面的影响。我们今天非常高兴能够跟这么一所伟大的大学的校长在这里交谈。 Professor Ingham, good talk to you. We appreciate the time. We hope you come to Hong Kong again and visit CTU at your convenience.
Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.
In the next episode, Professor Wei Kuo, president of City University of Hong Kong, will bring the audience to Israel to visit a university which is renowned for science and technology. This university plays an important role in the overall development of the nation. The Technion Israel Institute of Technology.